One of them has already fled directly to the DPRK, probably to hide out of harm's way or to negotiate something right behind the backs of the Americans. Let's talk about all of this directly now. I am Iryna Uzlova. This is YouTube 24 Live, and with us is Yuri Rashkin, a public and political figure, and with you, the states of America, as well as the county assemblyman of Rock County, Wisconsin. Yuri, greetings. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. That what Russian dictator Putin will trash in the Kremlin as early as Monday, at least we hope that what will trash him is American President Donald Trump, and Putin will trash his own in anger. Absolutely live. I even decided to try to visit it in parallel for a chat on Channel 24 to see what would happen. And I've got the commercials playing, so clearly live. More than we are direct and lively, and though Putin is certainly making sure that at least this part of our conversation here, maybe not so much. And again, Yur bombs us, so everywhere. As the local authorities of Chernivtsi tell me, I in particular communicated exclusively on our air thanks to the work of our entire team with the deputy mayor of Chernivtsi, which today was off the rails with Eugene Mahovikov. And he says, yes, this is a self-inflicted shelling of Chernivtsi. 2 dead, a day of mourning tomorrow. Our condolences to the families and loved ones, and speedy recovery to the wounded. As you see, Yura, another peaceful gesture from Putin, now targeting Chernivtsi, Lviv, and historic buildings in the city center. Well, they said in the Russian Ministry of Defense, Yura, on these, here are these houses, which some of them are more years old than me, 19 times. They said that it's not historical, so it's a memorial, yes. And the factory there was for the production of weapons. There's a house with white curtains and tulips with flowers. I think that's probably how they covered up ballistic missile production. There's no other way to cover it up. There is no other way to cover up Putin's bloodthirsty and terrorist genocidal intentions. Here, they are not covered in front of our eyes right now. This is an exclusive video from our channel. Yura, well, Putin fought another war with a kindergarten in Chernivtsi. The local authorities tell me that they will not break, but the residents of the city are in the opposite mood to take revenge and fight on. Yesterday fought in Odessa with horses and the beach, and in Kharkov with the maternity hospital, and babies that were born 3 days ago. He's doing all this to show that he's what? Wants to keep the war going, spits in the face of the same Trump who has called on him dozens of times to stop anyway. Well, look, there's no quicker way to wipe the smile off my face than to start talking about what Putin is doing with missiles, strikes, shayeds, and destroys and beats clearly. This is an war against civilians. This is clear to everyone except those who watch Russian TV. And if you watch Russian TV and you think you're there, so it was a strike on the plant, then most likely you're not watching Rashkin's, you're not watching Channel 24, and you don't have the information. In fact, it's not that you don't know it, you don't want to know it, and you don't know her. I can see that. But that will not save you from the group responsibility that all people in Russia bear, just as I, as an American, bear some of that group responsibility for what my government and my state is doing. We're taking on that part of democracy. Although, yes, in an authoritarian country.
Несут на себе все люди в России, так же, как я, как американец, несу на себе часть той групповой ответственности за то, что творит мое правительство и мое государство. Мы берем на себя эту часть демократии. Хотя, да, в авторитарной стране...
Well, that's a sad conversation, nevertheless. Look, I think there's a point that needs to be made here. I was asked by Anastasia Naritsina in the previous broadcast about whether these topics are discussed, to what extent they are discussed in the American infospace. And then I was just amazed at how much it could be. Well, here I have absolutely mixed feelings. Friends, tell me what you think. This is a picture of this, the New York chapter, front page of the New York Post, where it says, here's the boy who was killed by this drone. Yes, yes, thank you. I'm discussing Yura today too, yes. And, well, frankly, I think it's the paper that Trump thinks it is. And we, here, got lost. Yes, that it is necessary there. And they wrote in words even too soft, but it's a newspaper. And you think that's what, a wrong step? I think these are the steps that are left for our society to have this feedback option, because it has to be either Solovyov said it, or Fox News showed it, or the New York Post printed it.
Я думаю, что это те шаги, которые остались у нашего общества для того, чтобы вот этот вариант обратной связи. Потому что нужно, чтобы это было либо Соловьев это сказал, либо Fox News это показала, либо New York Post это напечатал.
And I'm glad that at least the New York Post can still print this because Fox News didn't show it to Solovyov ever. Well, there you go. Different audience, again, different sources of information. But it's very important because we see how much of our president's diagnosis lies in his part of those pictures. Even when at 20 on February 8th, before leaving the White House, Zelensky appeared to try to show Trump these photos. It's understandable. It works on him. That, and he can't. The violent footage annoys him. It gives hope. So it's very important that it was this picture of horror, and somehow this incredible tragedy can somehow help Ukraine. That's a big deal. On the other hand, going back, I guess, to our viewer's top question, can Trump be trusted? You can't, folks. You can't. And I don't trust him, and you don't trust him anymore. Why don't you trust him? Here's the write-up in the comments, probably because he says one thing and does another or does nothing at all, and so on time after time. Now, we have $3.8 billion left over from President Biden that can be spent, must be spent by the end of September of this year.
Сейчас у нас осталось от президента Байдена $3,8 миллиарда, которые можно потратить, нужно обязательно потратить до конца сентября этого года.
And all Trump has to do is just, well, how do you say, give an executive order. He's so good at it, giving instructions. And here he is thinking about what he may have already done. And once again, we do not fully understand and certainly do not trust him. And let me remind you, there were never any such questions about the Biden packages. There were questions about Biden's packages, what's inside, whether there's something there that we haven't really been told yet. But there are also experts saying on the parts, it's clear roughly what Ukraine can prepare for on the battlefield, this kind of thing. And there's no him at all. It's a total mess. And it's a great merit, not that it's a merit, but it's a great plus for Putin because it's destroying America, because what Trump is doing now with his uncertainty and his unpredictability, it's probably the worst thing that could happen to our country, to our economy, to our national security.
Потому что то, что делает сейчас Трамп, вот своей неопределенностью и непредсказуемостью, это самое, видимо, страшное, что может сейчас произойти с нашей страной, с нашей экономикой, с нашей национальной безопасностью.
Because we're not afraid that the Chinese will now start landing in California. We have such a migration service now, their budget has been increased tenfold. So it's not even 15 times. So now our migration services, they will have a budget bigger than the Russian Federation military budget. So here we are not afraid of that. But distrust of markets, distrust of investors, distrust of allies and countries like Ukraine, which we can see at the level of our viewers and listeners, and also at the level of people who have to make decisions and plan for the future. This is, of course, a disaster. But still, he's acting right now. What is this? What happened? How can he behave properly if he's like this? Well, we get it, and his head of HR is like this. Nah, he's acting out because Putin made him look really bad. Putin showed Trump as sort of like Lindsey Graham, like woohoo, like a weather vane that's going to sag in different directions, like he's beating his chest on one side, but on the other side, what's the point of it? And Trump didn't like it because unlike Lindsey Graham, he's a deeply sick man.
Как Линдзи Грэм, знаешь, такой флюгер в разные стороны прогнется, как бы он с одной стороны в грудь бьет, а с другой стороны какой от него смысл. И Трампу это не понравилось, потому что в отличие от Линдзи Грэма он глубоко больной человек.
I don't know what's going on with Lindsey Graham, but Trump, clearly there's something going on there, very so base, undiagnosed until the end. And most importantly, anything that isn't right now doesn't pass the distinction course of the right one. And as a result, he's offended, he looks weak, he's been insulted many times. And he's interesting now that he's trying to get out of the claws of the Kremlin as far as Trump can do it. He is trying to prove that he is independent. Well, yes, there are also parallel NATO countries that demand from him that he should, help an ally because Ukraine is not some kind of something, but it is now the most important international priority of the whole world. Even the Middle East is now, let's be honest, relegated to the background compared to what will happen if Ukraine loses this war. That's why NATO countries are now very supportive of Ukraine and pushing Trump. Plus in America, yes, the Republicans mean to cave in to Trump, but they're also hissing and they're not happy. But the interesting thing is that Putin is not sitting idly by. And the same thing he did in trying to defend effectively Iraq.
Но интересно-то что Путин не сидит сложа руки. И то же самое, что он сделал, пытаясь защитить эффективно Иран.
the Iranian regime the same thing it's doing now in defense of itself. Because we see that when Putin has a complete failure on the battlefield, he switches to the media space. But he doesn't shut it down. But it's just kind of then the burden shifts to Carlson's attacker and others who start saying, how can we do this? President, you have betrayed your flock. What kind of magician are you? But the Ukraine question is a little complicated, because it's politics, it's real stuff. And who is Putin? KGB major. So he has to what? Blackmail all this stuff. What's the need on Trump? Where's his vulnerability? Epstein, that means his personal connections. So all of a sudden we're seeing the Epstein cases, which of course there were questions there because the Trumpists have been yelling about this for a long time. Oh, conspiracy. There was Bill Clinton and the terrible Democrats. Naturally, it's all this, so to speak. Epstein was Trump's best friend until they had a fight over some estate when Trump went behind Epstein's back and bought it over. So what we're seeing is that there's an attack now on the Epstein case against Trump.
Естественно, все это, так сказать, Эпштейн лучший друг Трампа был, пока они не поссорились из-за какого-то поместья, когда Трамп за спиной Эпштейна его перекупил. Так вот, значит, мы видим, что сейчас идет атака по делу Эпштейна на Трампа.
And it's not that it could have started earlier or later, it blew up, so to speak. Well, it's just the opposite. It could have started at any time, but now it's coming when Trump needs to show that he supports Ukraine. Otherwise, he looks like a complete weakling. All of a sudden, this Epstein case has ignited with a new blue flame. And that, I think, and a good hint to Trump that, look, if you're going to be so proactive and try to get out of the clutches of the Kremlin, well, there's information here, the Epstein list, and a lot of people think that Trump and Democrats who always thought it was a total conspiracy stupidity have now seen this as a good political issue and are saying, yes, we need to disclose everything that's in the Epstein case right away. Don't think anything will happen there, but why not insist since it hurts Trump? And the fact that behind all of this, Epstein is clearly the Kremlin and the Kremlin's secret services, which, well, naturally, honey trap. I mean, this is to the holy for the Kremlin. So this is this Epstein, Trump, and Putin connection here in a very interesting way once Trump started talking more about helping Ukraine.
И Путина здесь очень интересным образом прослеживается, как только Трамп стал больше говорить о помощи Украине.
Well, the aid to Ukraine, if we are talking about actions, is still coming. Any way you look at it, and NATO says they agree with what you're proposing, and more and more we're talking about Epstein's department at the same time. And well, aid to Ukraine is coming. It is not give, not take, and various options are being considered. And Putin expected this suspension of aid to be permanent. Well, yes, it's interesting that here's calculated. That is, though, experts, supposedly, who will know, here are experts with these two sick elderly people. One crazy Putin and Trump, so it's no longer the clowns, it's something worse.
Что в конце концов у них будут испортиться отношения с Америкой, потому что Америка в конце концов не пойдет так далеко, как Путин хочет. Но это, мне кажется, сейчас момент, который наступил. Потому что Трамп долго принимал все эти вежливости от хозяина, но у него есть определенные желания, нужды, которые ему нужно выполнить.
And if the boss, as Trump himself called him, is not going to help, not going to do for him, but is going to make him look bad, I just can't understand to what point this president of the United States is going to forget that he is the president of the United States. Now, if he bombs a Putin and silences talk about Epstein, then no one will, so to speak. What will be the questions? It's all just going to be a quiet coincidence. But Trump is now messed up, so to speak. Well, since Putin couldn't give up his goals and Trump doesn't understand how you can live without wanting to make money, they had a mismatch. And for a long time, we've been waiting for this docking to happen. Trump ignored her for a long time, for 2 weeks, now he's ignoring her until Monday. That said, how can we trust the timing of someone we know is making an impulsive decision? Okay, so then he'll do nothing until the last moment.
Трамп ее долго игнорировал, 2 недели, сейчас он ее игнорирует до понедельника. И при этом как можно доверять срокам человека, про которого мы знаем, что он принимает решения импульсивно? Окей, значит, тогда он ничего не будет делать до последнего момента.
All right, so he'll twitch on Monday, and before that he'll, well, play golf, maybe talk to Putin, maybe see what strikes Putin will take. In the meantime, maybe Ukraine will capitulate before Monday. We can hope, from Trump's point of view, that a miracle happens. Why not? Let's wait and see. And the important thing is that eventually this is going to go to divorce whether they want it or not, because Putin is not going to stop. This is an important moment in American military diplomacy, because it was possible to follow the approach of Sullivan, Jake Sullivan, and Joe Biden, where we sort of help Ukraine. gradually build up. The price goes up for Russia. Gradually, it didn't work. Okay, Trump shows up and says, let's do the opposite. Let's give Putin everything he wants. And he'll stop, right? Because if he gets what he wants, he'll stop. It turns out he wants even more, and he wants things that Trump doesn't even control, and unfreezing the money and all these sanctions, which are largely dependent on Europe, who are not going to do anything here and help Putin. And this is where Trump needs to apparently put pressure on Europe and on Ukraine.
Выясняется, что он хочет еще больше, и он хочет вещи, которые Трамп даже не контролирует, и размораживание денег, и все эти санкции, которые во многом зависят от Европы, которая не собирается ничего здесь делать и помогать Путину. И тут надо, видимо, Трампу надавить на Европу и на Украину.
And that's a big problem. So as a result, they have an inconsistency. And where will it lead to? I don't know. We are now following what kind of thought, what new concept Lavrov has proposed. Oh, what could be in there? Maybe he decided to, say, propose to make Russia and Ukraine one country, call it Ukraine, and the capital in Kyiv, call it Kievan Rus. I doubt Lavrov can have such a new concept. He's probably got everything old too, like that old horses. Yeah, and he's that old. I also doubt that if the new concept, so he himself, Yura, what is there to talk about? He himself comes out and says, I represented our previous position, and this week their previous position, his own mouth was deficiency demilitarization. And now he's proving this former position in the DPRK where he went to ask, understandably further, and weapons and manpower to continue his war, and clearly he's not going to talk about flowers there. And that's right after talking to Rubio. So much for his new approach, more men and weapons. Maybe this is the new RF approach? I can't, folks. If you can explain how cutting 1,300 people from the U.S. State Department is in the best interest of the United States, this is a ministry that is undergoing the kind of purge that would be done by someone who worked for the Kremlin, because to imagine that this is somehow in the interest of the United States, it's not a ministry that has influence right now. A is not a ministry that has the power now. And then we hear that the White House is going to, now he's been given permission from the Supreme Court, and he's decided to do this, and there have been layoffs of 1,200 or 1,300 State Department employees. Well, there's a couple of issues that need to be raised here, because the attitude that we're seeing now between the Kremlin and the White House, where the White House is acting like they're serving or listening or being served by the Kremlin, is very interesting and sad and tragic and disturbing, because when we see Lavrov and Rubio meet, and afterwards Rubio comes out as usual with the kind of elongated face that Lavrov has for the life of him.
Это министерство, в котором сейчас идет та чистка, которую бы проводил человек, который работал на Кремль. Потому что представить себе, что это каким-то образом в интересах Соединенных Штатов, я не могу, друзья. Если вы можете объяснить, каким образом сокращение на 1300 человек Госдепартамента США это на пользу интересам Соединенных Штатов...
Write in the comments, educate me. But it just shows here that this is a weak ministry and an out-of-control subpoena. And what's more, we know now information has come out, who is the Wall Street Journal or something, that 40% of the ammunition Russia has is North Korean. This is Bloomberg published an interview with Kirill Budanov, Ukraine's chief intelligence officer, who says that 40% of the ammunition Russia now has on the battlefield. Yes, it's DPRK, thank you. Yes, so this is exactly the situation, and naturally this is saying that Lavrov should probably now go to Finyang. You can buy a dacha there, because such close ties that I understand that I'm regularly reminded by viewers that there are made-in-USA chips and various missiles, and I'm saying that we need to talk more about this, because when we have an administration that doesn't make sure that sanctions are implemented, it's like public pressure here has to somehow work.
Потому что когда у нас администрация, которая не следит за тем, чтобы выполнялись санкции, то это как бы общественное давление здесь должно каким-то образом действовать.
When people work for companies that are involved in this, if they have a suspicion that this is something that's going on, then something needs to be done. Because at the very least, shame needs to be brought to it. People should be ashamed if they support Russia. Well, North Korea has no shame. They have other priorities there. And of course, Lavrov needs to communicate with them more often now and take and collect instructions and pass them on to our man in Washington. How do you say that? I think if here was a congressman at the hearing who said if there was a Kremlin agent in the White House, what would he do differently than President Trump is doing? And I think if Russia had a CIA man as president, the manner in which he or she would collapse this state from within would be swift but effective, and so these kinds of mass layoffs, mass purges, I think, a very effective way of disarming the state from within. And I remember also, again, when U.S. troops invaded, there was a big invasion of Iraq, and they brought down the regime of Saddam Hussein, and they fired all these people, and that was the end of the state.
Я даже, мне кажется, очень эффективным способом обезоруживания государства изнутри. И я вспоминаю еще, опять же, когда американские войска вторглись, было большое вторжение Ирака, и снесли режим Саддама Хусейна, и всех этих людей поувольняли, и на этом закрылось государство.
After that, there was guerrilla warfare and what we still have today. So these mass purges of institutions, it's hard to see what good they will do. Well, we know where they're going, what the goal is here at least. It's just filling them with their own people who don't matter what they know, but they're our people. They've got our priorities, our backbone, and if afterwards there is a terrible flood in which hundreds of people die or go missing. Well, here the main thing is not to blame anybody. Not the main thing is to realize that everybody did the best they could, and only a very angry journalist, so very angry, like in Texas, who asked Trump such a question, could something have been done there about the prevention systems in Texas, that there Trump said only a very angry person would ask a question like that. But I think that if there was still a Kremlin agent sitting there, and for him to do differently, well, yes, it's clear that just we're not letting it do differently here because Ukraine will never agree to capitulation terms. But still, I think that even talking about sanctions, this project here, because lynch the Kremlin, no matter how you slice it, Trump's comrade arms Ukraine. This whole thing wouldn't have happened, Yuri. I don't think so. If it was really a Kremlin agent, it would be blocked. It would probably be usurpation of power by possible and impossible methods. They would have been exposed by now, especially the second cadence. And that brings us to sort of the core question of this administration. Are they sick or are they on purpose? And the sick are kind of still reduced to being incompetent because they're kind of doing it because they have some kind of problem. They're not educated. They're undiagnosed agents of the Kremlin, and that is the other way around. Well, yeah, either they're Kremlin agents or they have some kind of 2025 plan that they're implementing and they're just so bad at it, or both, and they're all fine with it. As if, as a result, we come to the conclusion that apparently they don't mind the results. And in a way, Putin too, because on the one hand, yes, Trump could always play even more, 110% more in the Kremlin's favor, but 90 or their 85 as if you calculate it.
Трамп всегда мог бы играть еще больше, на 110% в пользу Кремля, а на 90 или 85, как если это просчитать.
But you have to keep in mind that the main component, the main benefit of President Trump is chaos, because he's creating uncertainty and he's destroying America, as I've explained. So in that sense, it's still a plus for Putin. Even a crazy person who, with the support of the Kremlin, ends up in that position and can't work with the Kremlin is still a plus because they push through to the position of President of the United States, someone like that. Wow. And Keith Kellogg is not going to walk around Kreshchatyk for a week, really. No, it is, I think, to remind you that President Trump is the navel of the world, the most central event. If you forgot about it, here's Keith Kellogg to remind you pronto. I think it's diplomacy. It's trying to show leadership in some way, and in some way, in a sense, trying to bet on both sides in the casino, both on black and white. We'll put a little bit on Ukraine. But land metals are rare there, and now more help. This is important, really. These are all such thin threads that are gradually tying this administration together, contrary to all these magicians who are so demanding that the president be isolationist.
Теперь больше помощи. Это важно на самом деле. Это вот все такие тонкие нити, которые постепенно связывают эту администрацию, вопреки всем этим мага, которые так требуют, чтобы президент был изоляционистом.
These are the tenuous ties that continue to bind America, but which are all transactional, if you will, of course, and it could all be finished off tomorrow if he were offered a little more. It's just Mr. Bourne from The Simpsons saying, well, I'd trade it all in for a little bit more, and here's how. I'm just this kind of president, these kind of people around him, and Keith Kellogg, who happens to be in Ukraine, well, let him remind everyone just wondering about the magician's connections. You know what MAGA has become so unhappy with Trump right now. I even have trolls who channel on the Rashkin report man, I ban him, ban him, ban him, ban him. Now he shows up in a red hat, a photo, but says, I am now for the mask. I said, what? He says, yes, he says, because Musk... Well, so here's a real businessman. Trump is doing something crazy. Interesting. And we see that Trump has really big problems with his domestic base, which, unclear for whatever reason, has now fired up. Here they are burning against him, but they believe that he's not keeping his promises. Well, the only thing he's fulfilling is the migrant thing.
Интересно. И мы видим, что Трамп, у него действительно большие проблемы с внутренней базой, которая непонятно по какой причине сейчас разожглась, вот и горит против него. Но они считают, что он не выполняет свои обещания. Ну, единственное, он выполняет по поводу мигрантов.
While he should be deporting more, he's basically just arresting them now, and deportations are lower than under Biden. So some, again, slackness, a mess, or a purpose for what they're trying to do here, or is that what they want to have here? And on the other hand, Trump, in MAG's opinion, is not fulfilling his promises. He said that means he will stop helping everyone and continues to help Ukraine in some ways, and he helps Israel. All in all, such a president, just a traitor to our promises. And there was some other thing he did there about when he kind of backed off about what they thought, and now they're having a civil war right and right. And so this right and left could really split the Republican Party. But let's look at the results at the polls. So far, all Republican politicians are ultimately answerable only to Trump. And Peter Hegseth may put aside there's an investigation right there against him, as if, or here's just a reprieve made. What's the difference? Well, yes, as a matter of fact. So maybe the investigation will be fair and prove he wasn't guilty at all.
А Пита Хексета могут отставить там расследование прям такое против него, как будто бы, или его просто козлом отпущения сделали?
А в чем разница?
Ну да, собственно говоря. Ну так может расследование будет справедливо и докажет, что он вообще не виноват.
And in fact, well, I can't believe that if everyone is reporting to Trump, yes, that, and Pete Hegseth, that this self-imposed it could be his decision to suspend arms shipments for as many as a third time in a row. Something about him going AWOL all the time. I think it seems to me that before you fire a minister, you should probably fire a deputy minister. And so this Mr. Colby who initiated all of this, if this really isn't what the president wanted, well, so maybe there's some way to get this man away from the control panel, or he continues to be there and everything is right and it's just a conversation about priorities, or if someone was joking or someone was hinting, but someone as valuable as Elbridge Colby is not going to be displaced or changed, well then, what's there to say about the Secretary of Defense? I think he's so vulnerable that every day he's not fired by the end of the day is a win for Pete Hegseth. He has no better option on life than what Trump is offering him. Today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, he has no better option because everyone knows he has many, many problems and is at work every day.
У него нет более лучшего варианта по жизни, чем то, что ему предлагает Трамп. Сегодня, завтра, послезавтра. У него нет лучшего варианта, потому что все знают, что у него много-много проблем, и каждый день на работе...
He can be fired for a cause. Well, in this sense, I am reminded of this history of the Soviet Union. When there were purges, regularly one savage was eaten by other savages, and there was something to eat for. But officially, it was always for something else. For example, we're going to remember now, going back to the American today, how with Elon Musk, the Air Force just severed its relationship with the United States because now launching a missile on an atoll south of there or somewhere 800 miles from Hawaii, now that's, a threat to the environment. And before that, it wasn't the environment, or before that, it wasn't on planet Earth. What's going on? That's why when this type of thing, some strategic use truth, you lose confidence in everything. And that's what these people want. They just know that when Pete and Hex eat it up, nobody's going to cry for him, nobody's going to feel sorry for him. They're going to say, yay, finally. And Pete Hex understands that. The only one in favor of him on this whole thing seems to be Trump. So he is sticking with Trump and will do what Trump wants him to do. And the question is if it's really Hex's decision to do that or not.
Держится за Трампа и будет делать то, что Трамп хочет. И вопрос в том, если это действительно было решение Хексета или нет.
Boils down to the fact that if Trump didn't like it, Pete and Hext would never have signed it or done it. Well, that's where I think it's unlikely he would have acted as an independent figure without the ultimate such goodness from Trump. But is any dramatic change in Trump's entourage even possible in the near future or even before the congressional elections? Or is he happy with all the faces around him right now? Because still, no matter how you look at it, there are more sensible ones out there, the same Rubio and Callahan we were reminiscing about, and then there's this under Hegseth. Well, these ones probably even favor Trump more and generally do whatever he wants. It's an interesting point because people have said that in Trump's first cadence, he had people changing all the time and what a mess it was because of that. And these expert pundits thought it would be the same this time. It didn't seem that way to me, and I think what we're seeing so far is, well, relative constancy. Although you have to look into whether or not there are these conspiracy theorists who are now in charge of the FBI, if they do leave there and protest that the Epstein case is not being investigated or is being investigated or whatever they come up with, then that would be for a definite change in the administration. But Trump himself is like, if these people agree with him, they're fine with him. If they are telling him what he wants to hear, why should he get rid of them? The only thing is that if something terrible happens, someone should be used as an extreme person. But so far, apparently, it has not come to that yet, and he is even using some Putin's approach, when if we get rid of a person when he is criticized, we show our weakness because we then supposedly bow to the opposition. When then, if a Russian official was insulted, or in those rather old FBC films, when some Chaika or Medvedev or someone else was exposed, then they would say, now they won't be fired for sure.
Достаточно уже старых фильмах ФБК, когда раскрывали какого-нибудь Чайку или Медведева или еще кого-нибудь, потом говорили, вот теперь-то их точно не уволят.
So, in a way, I expect similar behavior from Trump, and I just expect layoffs if there were layoffs when people disagreed with Trump in the first cadence, because there were still adults there. And the fact that there are no adults now is borne out by the fact that Pete Hegseth continues to be Secretary of Defense, because if Marco Rubio was actually an adult and not someone who just looks at all of this and realizes that if he's going to hang in there and agree, here he is understanding how this system works. He needs to just go along with everything and be like this. Then I don't think he doesn't realize how he's destroying his reputation. You can no longer later say, I'm actually an adult. If you're behaving in this irresponsible way, and you're suggesting sending people and getting people deported to South Sudan because you need to show cruelty in the face of this administration, I don't think it's going to help him in future elections. The Kremlin is not publicly inducing Iran to give up uranium enrichment in exchange for uranium supplies, and Putin has seemed to be telling Trump and Iranian officials that he supports the idea of a nuclear deal.
Кремль непублично склоняет Иран к отказу от обогащения урана в обмен на поставки урана, и Путин как будто бы заявлял Трампу и иранским официальным лицам, что поддерживает идею ядерной сделки.
Axios is reporting on this. Axios, yes, that Putin again. Hasn't he figured it out yet, or that basically Trump wants him that way? I don't get it. I mean, at the time, Trump was saying, I don't need your peace efforts on Iran. Deal with yourself. What is behind all this? Why is Putin offering himself again, or is this also some kind of hidden game? Well, in a certain sense, we know it's a hidden game. Now, unfortunately, because they don't give us the information, there was more information under Biden, less need to try to put some things together and see if that explains anything to us, or if it just confuses things more. But the attitude, and very important in this situation, is the power of precedent. Because when we see what happened in this situation last time, it helps us, I think, to move forward. And, for example, the Uranus and Iran story reminds me, write in the comments if you disagree. Ira might disagree that when Putin inserted himself into the situation between the Syrian Assad, and Barack Obama. And also, so played a role in sort of getting then alleged weapons of mass destruction out of Syria. And that's how it got in and sort of bought the regime a few more years of existence. And in that sense, we are now seeing something similar or very similar to what Putin is trying to do, but his reputation is not what it used to be. He can't in any way now, it's been, 10 years or more since, and especially since he got involved in Ukraine, it's Putin that nobody trusts. And that's not any kind of a reason to do anything. On the other hand, yes, Trump does care about Putin's handling of Russia. And this, I think, is the most interesting thing here, because while Russia is happily advising its own client regime, Iran, how to get out from under this situation, yes, stop enriching uranium, we are, so to speak, that's it. Everything will be fine. And why is the regime fighting for that nuclear button? To survive. And then Russia says, well, don't survive, we don't care, we will save you there, I don't know, Tucker Carlson or Dacha in Rostov, don't worry, everything will be fine.
А зачем режим борется за эту ядерную кнопку? Чтобы выжить. И тогда Россия говорит, Ну, не выживайте, нам-то, господи, по боку, мы вас там спасем, я не знаю, Такер Карлсон или дача в Ростове, не волнуйтесь, все будет нормально.
And Iran is nervous. And so here's this interesting point, and Putin himself could stop fighting. Everything would be nice and easy, but can't do it yourself, can't advise others. Please, this is, like a person who weighs 300 pounds, 200 pounds there, and advises others how to lose weight. Vladimir, look in the mirror with yourself and stop meddling with your ideas with others. I think it will make sense to you, although there's such a crooked mirror in the Kremlin. More than that. And they'd sooner crash from it, as well as all their hopes of getting anything going. Yura, 4,000 people almost worked with you. Thank you very much. Today and always I say to you, see you on our English language streams and Russian language ones next week. Take care of yourself. Have a good day. Zhetsa. Thank you. I invite everyone to join me and Slava Malamudov and Kanat Ibragimov on the Rashkin Report channel, literally in 20 minutes when we discuss this, all the news of the week. A bit more humor or irony wouldn't hurt, and we need something to lift the mood. Thanks, Ira, and thanks to all our viewers and listeners. Glory to Ukraine, glory to our heroes. And in 18 minutes, join me on YouTube 24 with Roma Tsimbalyak. Yes, the same Roma you talked to, Yura. Can I send a shout out? Hey, Roma, hi. All right, folks, that's it for now. Subscribe to Rashkin's YouTube, Raykin Report, and Raykin Report in English. Like, comment, and we love hearing from you. Take care, see you soon, and we will win.
И на YouTube 24-го также ваши лайки, комментарии. Всегда приятно с вами пообщаться. Берегите себя, увидимся и победим.